Lee, it's so good to meet you, sir. Thank you for taking a minute out.
Hey, it's great to be here.
So, before we get into your life as a novelist, storyteller, producer, futurist, all the wonderful things that are a part of your world, I want to know 5 years ago, this pandemic changed so many things about us. How did you survive the pandemic, and how has it influenced the way that you do things now in 2025?
Well, it was a big game changer for my work, which was a production. I was doing a lot of podcast production and some video production. And suddenly the studios were going out of business and, the places we recorded weren't there anymore. And we all switched to this, and meaning Zoom-like things. And that's really stuck. I mean, my wife is in the next room teaching a class. I teach for the University of Southern California. I go into work, but I teach a lot on Zoom, and I have a lot of meetings on Zoom. And a lot of what we do as humans is on this little box that we're looking at right now. That I would say was the biggest change. I got, I don't think I've ever quite recovered. I'm a bit of an introvert, and I think it made me even more introverted. It made me more likely to cope with what was going on. But also, I don't think I've been as sociable since pre-pandemic. I still, I see people. I'm not a hermit. I go out, but
Yeah.
it feels different.
Yeah.
The time in the box is a lot more of how I spend my day than it used to be.
I think that phenomenon, along with the amount of change that we all went through, is going to take a long time to feather out. I think,
Mhm.
putting some kind of label on what this means to speak in this way instead of in a room, that's going to continue to expand in very, very big ways, especially with AI.
Yeah, definitely. I was just writing an article about humans are not made to look at a jerky image of themselves on a screen while they talk.
Yeah.
I mean, it just does something to the brain.
Hmm.
So I'm a big advocate of turning off my self view because I find it very weird to just kind of be checking on myself in that
Yeah.
other screen.
Yeah.
And there's many things like that. This sort of weird self-awareness, kind of like an echo chamber self-awareness that we're into now.
I didn't do video for a long time. I was like, what's the point? And then and then I realized that audio quality was really good about Zoom. But once I got in there, it almost there's a natural it feels okay. But for a long time I resisted it because I came from jazz radio. It's like we just want the interview. We just want the audio. And then it kind of expanded. But is that modern phenomenon like FaceTime and all these other aspects of us that have to have this technology going on both ends, you know?
Yeah. Now I have to ask you a question. Who
Yeah.
did you play when you played jazz on the radio? Who did you play?
Oh man, I do it still. I've been doing it for 14 years. I
Cool.
play everybody. I dig into the modern cats. I'm really into I come from that bebop school. I was baptized by Kinda Blue, and then I got into
Mm.
Monk and Coltrane and all those cats, but I tend to still always, no matter who's out there, I gravitate towards the bebop. I love the vibraphone. Anytime you can get that in the mix. So yeah, it's but there's so many the thing about jazz is it gets kind of lumped into being in a museum. The 50s and
Mm.
60s were this prized era, but so many people are out there doing absolutely wonderful work right now. It's an expanding universe of music that's wondrous,
Yeah. I
you know?
was a kid in Mamaroneck, New York,
Yeah.
and I was learning the guitar because kids took guitar lessons, and it must have been junior year of high school or some ninth grade maybe. And the teacher in the school was just this old dude, and it turned out he was a major jazz musician, a gigging jazz musician. And after a while, I learned how to read music, and he dispensed with the lessons. And we would come and he'd say, "Let's just jam." So for half an hour, 45 minutes, I would just jam with him. He would do the changes and I would kind of plunk along and try to learn how to do solos. And then he said, "Have you ever heard of this guy, John Coltrane?" No. I mean, I know. Is he like Jimi Hendrix, or is he like Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. Is he like that?
Yeah.
I said, no, give a listen. And that was really it for me. Once I listened to Coltrane, any Coltrane, Countdown, and the period where he's getting exploratory, but not totally into outer space, which is very beautiful now. But at the time, as a 14, 15, 16-year-old trying to process this, that kind of blue period, the monk stuff, and it was just like it was mind blowing,
Yeah.
and I bought a saxophone. I started taking saxophone lessons. I thought I was going to be a saxophone player for real,
Yeah.
like I went to school, studied music composition, and was playing that saxophone whenever I could, enough so people would come out of the dorms and say, "Will you stop playing that saxophone? It's 3 o'clock in the morning. Can you
Yeah.
please shut up with that?"
Uh-huh.
So it was very, and it still is a great passion of mine. And I was listening to Jackie McLean last night.
Yeah.
He plays a little sharp, and there's
Yeah.
a song called Melody for Melanie, where he just like rips out these most, it's just like he's throwing it all out there. And I've
Yeah.
I've been listening to that for decades, and it's always new. It always feels great to me to listen to that.
And the beauty of doing jazz radio is that I get kind of some of the backstories on all of the, like
Hmm.
Jackie McLean. There was a musician one time that talked about how he loved gelato when he was on tour in Italy. And just to see Jackie with a big ice cream cone, you know. And then I interviewed Michelle Coltrane, John and
Wow.
Alice's daughter. And she
Wow.
talked about moving to California and watching Sarah Vaughan ride by on a bicycle. And I was just like, wow, what a cool thing, to get these little vignettes that
Yeah.
humanizes him. But the thing about Coltrane, there's a movie on Netflix that I watched. He was such a strong and powerful spiritual being. He believed in his music. He put everything into it, but there was a spirituality. There was like this fuse of like all of the levels of human beings that make us redeemable that went all the way into him. That came
Yeah.
out of that horn. That's almost like a religion, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I went years ago. I went to see Ravi, his son,
Yeah.
play in a Hollywood club, and he was, playing very beautiful stuff. Played soprano, played tenor, and then a big stretch limo pulls up outside, and Alice Coltrane gets out,
Wow.
sits in for one number, which was like indescribably beautiful. Got in, left, got in the car and left. But she came by like, please come by, mom, and she came by.
Yeah.
That and seeing Elvin Jones. I saw Elvin Jones in New York at Purchase College upstate. He played for 2 or 3 hours, just him on a stage.
Wow.
I'd never seen anything like that in my life.
That's insane.
It was insane, but it was totally riveting.
Yeah. I remember one time I interviewed Terry Gibbs. The
Uh,
he's actually turned 100 this year. We share the same birthday, and he lives out in California. And he explained when he was on the road, he brought Coltrane with him, and it was when
wow,
Alice and him met. And Alice was painfully shy, and she used to sit in the back of the bar, and there was like this little telephone booth thing, and she would just blush and watch John. And he said he watched them fall in love, and it was just so
that's
cool
amazing.
to hear.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? Those
Yeah,
little
wow.
vignettes, the backstory that became Michelle and Ravi, and this legend of the Coltrane dynasty. It's amazing, you know.
Beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah.
very
So let
cool.
me ask you this. There's so many things that go into what you do, but if I put you in front of a bunch of 12-year-olds and we had to flesh out exactly what you do on a daily basis, it's career day, and the kid in the back of the room is like, what do you do for a living? What's your answer?
Well, I would say what I do for a living has changed. I've been a bit of a shapeshifter, but the underlying skill set that I use all the time, the thing that I do, is I write down stories. Sometimes I write down stories that other people tell me. Sometimes I write down stories that I think of. I've worked in a lot of news environments and television environments, and sometimes that's writing down what the actor says or writing down what the news person says. But in a way, I'm kind of like a chronicler, kind of like a recorder, like a human recorder of stuff.
Yeah.
And then I put it out in various different ways. I think of these big arcs as waves. I've seen my dad rode the TV wave. He was one of the first lawyers in TV. And I rode the cable TV wave for a while, and now I rode the streaming wave for a while, and now I'm riding the podcast wave and the independent book publishing wave. And these things, the box changes, the context changes, but basically what I'm doing is recording stories, remembering things. A big job for me is remember,
Yeah.
write it down and remember, and then put it into a format that's going to inform or entertain people. That's a little beyond the, did you say 12-year-old or 7-year-old?
A 12-year-old. No, I think they would dig
Oh,
it.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I think they would get it too. So what did you want to be at 12? What was your dream life?
Oh, I was so into music at that time. I had a flute, a saxophone, a clarinet, a couple of guitars, and I just practiced music all the time. And I just had all this music in my head that I wanted to get out. I was writing stories then, and that became a bigger thing. There was a dividing point where I studied music in Ohio at a place called Antioch College, which was a terrible place to study music, but it was nice in Ohio. I
Yeah.
went back to New York and I had some friends who were session musicians, which means, they were perfect sight readers and they could just jump into a session and play anything. And some of them had like Monday night gigs at clubs. And I realized at that moment I was way outclassed. Like there was no way. I had so much to learn to be a gigging session museum or even do what they did on the most like workman-like solid level. I had a friend who was a piano tuner by day and gigged at night. He was a baritone sax player. I realized, wow, I am like making a living at that, and I was already living in the Lower East Side in a very small apartment with rats as roommates. So I got jobs in kitchens. My story goes that I decided that being a waiter would allow me to write because I decided to start writing plays and some novels, but mostly plays. So I went into restaurants and said, "Do you need any waiters?" And they would give me a test. How do you carry this? And I do it wrong, and they'd say, "Get out of here." Or I went to a very fancy restaurant. They said, "What's steak tartare?" And I said, "Well, it's steak." I didn't know. It's steak with a special sauce. Get out of here. That's wrong. It's raw meat, actually.
Yeah.
So I went into finally a restaurant in the village in downtown Greenwich Village, and the guy, I said, "Do you need waiters?" He said, "Can you cook?" And I said, "No." And he said, "You're hired." And he hired me as a line cook, like the lowly guy who chops things up.
Yeah.
He first handed me a paintbrush and I painted the restaurant because it was new.
Yeah.
But I started working as a line cook, just like, and got some, went up the ladder a little bit. And that job, I could work from 4 in the afternoon till 2 in the morning, ride my bike home to blow off steam, get a little rest, and then I could write during the day in the morning. So I love music, but I realized that you got to go with your innate skills. And
Yeah.
for me, it's writing and telling stories and remembering things.
Do you remember the first book or seminal book growing up that really sucked you into that world?
Probably anything by Aldous Huxley. He's an English writer. He
Uh-huh.
wrote Brave New World.
Oh yeah.
And he was told he had 6 months to live, so he pounded out like a million novels, like one a month or whatever. And I got my parents got me like an account at a bookstore, and I spent $1,000 in a couple of months, which is a lot of money,
Yeah.
buying paperback books. I just read every book, and I burned through Aldous Huxley, Vladimir Nabokov, uh, any spy novels, John le Carré. I just burned through the entire writer's works,
Yeah.
just one after the other, and almost literally sometimes taking them apart. Like, okay, how does this work? How does this, what makes this novel work or not work?
Did you ever think that the Huxley idea was going to become so absolutely a part of our taste and world today in 2025?
Probably not, but he was a pretty smart guy.
Yeah.
And he had many of his notions, the way society would be organized. He had maybe it's a respect slash fear for technology that others at that time, maybe George Orwell, maybe, but
Yeah.
Huxley really understood that technology would be the defining movement of
Yeah.
our time, even bigger than capitalism, even bigger than whatever, toast.
Yeah,
So I think there was an inkling that he was onto something,
yeah.
with that, and I think people realized, scary as it was going to turn true, most of it.
So going from that notion of you're going to be a musician, that you went to being a line cook, which was going to be a gateway for you to be a writer. Talk to me a little bit about your evolution in your career up to this point. What solidified it for you that this was going to be your avenue to tell stories in various mediums?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I was writing plays for off Broadway, and I got one off Broadway. And there is something amazing about you sit in your room, you type it out or write it out, you get that script duplicated, and you hand it out to actors. And one day, these people are speaking your lines in rehearsal. They're walking around on a blank stage, nothing's there. There's a work light, just one light shining down. And they turn to you and say, this line doesn't work. And I say, you're right. And it's just that feeling was like, okay, if I could do this for the rest of my life, that's going to be pretty cool because it's a wonderful collaboration. And for the most part, the actors are pretty wonderful when they're dealing with a playwright. They may not be so nice in their romantic relationships or with directors, but when they're dealing with the writer, it's pretty nice. And that sort of mutual respect is something that I'm always trying to latch on to again. You get it sometimes in a podcast where if I've done podcasts a few with actors and you get that mutual respect. In Hollywood, no, writers are not really respected, even less so in the age of AI. They can be, unless they become director producer types, hyphenates, the writer doesn't really get that respect. But at those early days in New York theater, sure. I mean, it was like, this is amazing. Hearing my words come back better than I could have ever imagined them in my own head or in my own voice. I would read my lines out loud till I got hoarse because you need to hear them out loud. But to
Yeah.
hear them coming out of trained actors was just incredible. So that really was a turning point for me.
I was a disciple of Letterman and all of those cats back in the day, and they
Hmm.
always loved writers. I mean, even to this day, Kimmel and Conan and all
Hmm.
those guys, there's this symbiosis that exists between the on camera and behind the scenes. Even
Right,
SNL. I mean, there's a
right.
tightness, you know,
Guess what's a really coveted and great job to get if you can get it as a writer?
being on those shows.
Yes,
I mean,
sure.
it's like a musician having a weekly gig at a joint. Like that's it. You got to hone your skills, steady paycheck. You're around talent all the time. That would be a dream.
It's a dream. I mean, way back when I lived in New York, I actually wrote some test monologues for Letterman. I was trying to get my agent to submit them to Letterman, but nothing happened with it. But it was fun to try.
Yeah. So my day job, I'm in Grandview, Missouri, which is a suburb of Kansas City. I'm an IT technician, and
Hmm.
there's a history here of people graduating. Mark Pender, the trumpet player for Conan O'Brien, graduated from Grandview in '75, and he's such a great dude. And he got into that whole Bruce Springsteen, E Street world, but he was
Hmm.
always on that show, so he was always on the periphery of like the best entertainment. He could play his music. That to me, when
Great.
I think about the best of both worlds, that might have been something, that would have been good. Paul would have been like, hey, I need a horn player in the band. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah. Well, isn't that so often how it happens? It's a bit of this kind of universe of people and luck and serendipity.
Totally.
And there are plenty of musicians I've met who are working hard and they're really skilled and we've never heard of them. They do what they do, but they don't break out into that kind of name musician.
I went to Eureka Springs this summer with my wife. We went down for our anniversary, and there was this cover band of these older guys that were just playing in some bar. And they were just playing cover tunes. And I went up and I talked to one of the guys, and he happened to be a jazz enthusiast and played guitar. And I just have the older I get, I have more of a respect for those guys because they know they're just doing it for the love. But they're still lugging all the equipment, they're still plugging it all in. They never gave up on that dream. And I think as humans, no matter where we are, how much money or how much clout we get, if you could hold on to that dream and never let it go, that's the sauce.
Yeah, absolutely. The guitar teacher I mentioned, his name was John Quara. He lived, I don't know, maybe in the Bronx, but someplace where he had a lot of instruments. And he would come in on a hot summer day and say, "It's really hot today, and it's really hot in my place." And I said, "Oh, well, don't you have air conditioning?" No. Don't you open a window? No, the windows are nailed shut. He was so worried about because he had all these valuable. If you know the name Jimmy Rainey,
Yes.
uh, I the guitar that my teacher sold me when I was traveling around the country running out of money, I put as a kid, I put an ad in the paper and I was living in Kentucky and I go to this house and Jimmy Rainey opens the door. He says, "Let's have a look at the guitar." I sold my guitar to Jimmy Rainey.
Wow. That's
I didn't know
awesome.
who he was really, but I recognized him when he opened the door.
Yeah. Oh man, I've had him on the show a lot. He is
Sure.
in the lexicon, man. He's the cat.
Yeah.
So there is a place and it's going to come to me while we're talking. It's a Netflix movie and it's about a place out in LA, outside of LA, and it's a guitar place. It's vintage guitars. And it's going to come to me. I'm going to have to send it to
Haven't
you
seen
later,
it
and I
yet.
can't believe I'm missing it. But all of the people, big people, go there. All of the musicians, from Aerosmith all the way down. So every album, Guns N' Roses, Slash has been there. All these albums that are iconic in our lifetime. Or John's famous, maybe it's John's famous guitars, and it's just this place in the valley,
Yeah.
and everybody goes. And I just think about that vintage quality of Les Pauls and all these instruments that get passed down.
Sure.
They become a part of like the most iconic albums of all time.
Yeah, yeah, it's incredible. And then I was making a documentary, directing a documentary a few years ago for A&E about breaking things.
Yeah.
It was a little silly. It's called I think it was I can't remember the name. It wasn't Breaking Point, but anyway, they hired Alice Cooper to be the narrator, the rock guy, Alice
Oh
Cooper.
yeah.
And there were two great moments in that. One was there was a lot of narration to read, and I thought, oh no, this guy, his voice is going to give out. Then I realized he's been screaming on stage for decades. Like this guy's voice is not going to give out. Like we
Yeah.
did take after take, we did the whole day recording this thing, but he was fine.
Yeah.
And the other great moment was at the end of the show, he was going to break a guitar because that was the shtick, that was the thing of the show.
Yeah.
So we had the shot all set up, and I had my several cameras going, and he said, "Okay, let me show you how we're going to break this guitar. We're going to hit it here. This piece is going to fly that way, so you get out of the way. This piece is going to fly that way, and you shouldn't stand there." And of course, he was right. It was like a physicist, detonating a nuclear bomb. He knew exactly where all the parts were going to go and exactly what was going to happen.
It's
And he
amazing.
he took care of the roadies, that was us, the crew, so we wouldn't get hit by anything.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Um, so let me ask you this. In your life, in your career overall, who's been your ultimate inspirational force, your hero?
I really think about John Coltrane quite a lot
Yeah.
as just it's a bit abstract, but his kind of the spiritual quality you were talking about before, his drive towards something
Yeah.
that he couldn't see or touch, but it was there for him. Uh, So if I came around and around, it'd probably be him. I like reading. I just reread the Herman Hesse novel Steppenwolf, and some of those
Yeah.
old-timey Hesse type writers. I come back to over and over again. But the journey of Coltrane, going from that bebop world, which you talked about, and heroin and clubs to a deep spiritual connection with a higher power, and the way Alice continues that, even, it's it's just kind of, for me, that would be it. It would be him.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me ask you this. The thing about making documentaries and films is that we get to see like the Michael Jordan, like the before and after, and you know, tech like giants like Steve Jobs and all these other different things that are documentable, but you don't see that with writing. Writing is a solitary
Mhm.
activity. It's not something that's documented well. If you could get into a room and watch somebody write their novel, write and construct their words and how they did it, and how they paced and what they drank and what they smoked, who would you love to have been a fly on the wall to watch create?
Wow. I mean, Hemingway must have been pretty interesting because he worked at a standing desk, and I about half the day I work at a standing desk, and he really hated his first drafts. And he worked on a typewriter, which means you have to be decisive or you're wasting a lot of paper and time and typing. So he would have been pretty interesting to watch. There's probably a lot of drinking involved, so that probably wouldn't have been that interesting to watch.
Right.
Uh, there's a writer who I read now named Robin Sloan, he's written three novels, is working on another series. I've interviewed him, and he works in a kind of a big studio with 3D printers, and he prints things and he makes things, and he in the when he's not writing, he does olive oil. He has an olive oil business
Wow.
and he can code things and he seems to live in a very this world that's between the technical and olive oil, like
Yeah.
computers and farming. And
That's
he
fascinating.
and so I like that, I would like to see what it's like, but it is true that a lot of it is walking around,
Yep.
getting another cup of coffee or tea, just dithering around, making yourself work on something, and then suddenly it's 5 o'clock and you've written 1,500 words.
Absolutely.
It's very trance-like for me, and in many ways. My youngest son is a cross-country runner, and when he runs, he goes into kind of a trance.
Uh-huh.
It's good that he's a cross-country runner because when he runs in the street, he was once hit by a car, not terribly, but and it's a bit like that for me. Like I'm looking at the wall, but I'm seeing a dungeon or
Yeah.
a spaceship or something. And sometimes when I come out of it, you know, my wife and kid are looking at me like, all right, where is he now? It like takes a minute to land the ship. So it's very much in this other world, which is a place that I like going, but it's definitely not this.
Yeah, for sure. So, as a practitioner of podcasting, I'm curious, what was the first podcast that hooked you in that was a serum that made you think, man, I love this world?
It's actually my own. The thing is that I had all the equipment and I think I wanted to make a podcast about global citizens and global tech people. And
Yeah.
I'd listened to them like maybe, I don't even remember, honestly, I don't remember the first one I listened to, but I had a microphone and I had the recording stuff. So I just started doing it myself. This is in like 2009, 2010 or
Wow.
so.
Yeah.
And I made a tech podcast and a global citizen podcast and an education podcast. And I just started making them
Yeah.
because I had the skills. I'm an editor, so I
Yeah.
could edit them. It was before we had all the gadgets to help.
Yeah. That's amazing. So, if you had a dream tonight and ran in to your 12-year-old self and you had a book in your hands, like a coffee table book, and you handed it to that young version and said, that's how your life turned out, would that young version believe it?
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
Definitely not. I mean, I know what my 12-year-old vision was. I still remember it, and it had a lot to do. It was in California, and it was movie making, and it was living in sort of a greenhouse, but it was sort of a William Randolph Hearst kind of.
Yeah.
And we don't live in Xanadu or anything like that right now,
No.
so I think it would have been, really? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, right. So, of everything that you've done, accomplished, and more importantly, evolved to, what are you the proudest of that you've done in your life?
Well, of course, I'm proud of being a father.
Yeah,
Your kids take off and become their own beings, and that's pretty awesome.
yeah,
I'm very proud of these books that I'm writing now because I've always wanted to write novels ever since I was young, and I've written a bunch that I put in a drawer. And I just finished a trilogy. The new one is called Liberation, which, by the way, you can read out of order. Liberation is the one that's out now. And I'm starting another trilogy, and I'm really proud of being able to just walk up to those characters every day and say, all right, what's our scene? It's kind of like meeting the actors in the theater.
Yeah,
All right, who goes first? Who wants to say their lines first?
that's it.
And I'm very proud of the having the ability to do that. And it's great to share it with people. It's great to have people say, oh, I like the book, or you get a good review, or see the book somewhere in the wild. There was a friend of mine saw the book in a bookstore and said, whoa, she took a picture of it. The book's out in the wild.
Yeah.
So those are nice things.
That's beautiful. So, Lee, at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you family, friends, all of your fans, everyone that knows you in a business sense, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Well, I think I'm at heart a super creative guy. And I can be a bit rough and abrasive. I seem pleasant now and I can be nice, but I know that I'm sometimes seen as a little bit of a rough character. I kind of speak my mind. But I think basically it's a creative guy who's building creative worlds that other people get to have fun with.
So let's end this on a fantastical note. We get off the call, time machine pulls up. You can get in and punch in the digits and go see any jazz show in the history of that
Wow.
music. Where are you going?
Well, I'm definitely going to see Monk and Train,
Yeah,
in probably in the Village.
yeah.
I would definitely love to see Thelonious Monk, have seen him play live. So probably that puts me right like 60s-ish,
Yeah.
late 50s, early 60s in Greenwich Village, New York.
Wow. That would be mind blowing. There's sometimes people are like, I want to see when the tomb rolled back and Jesus came back or a day in his life. I think about Coltrane, the mythical level of his existence, of what it would be like to actually hear, because that power coming out of that horn, even on a speaker, is crazy. To feel that in your chest, that would be nuts.
That would be nuts. I was walking around in New York years ago, turned a corner, and Ornette Coleman, we almost collided. Wow,
Yeah. Yeah, there's a book out there called it was written about the kind of blues sessions, and they talk about all the
Oh
musicians,
yeah, yeah.
and it talks about I'll send you a link over to it. It's been a while, but it goes through the history of Coltrane and Bill Evans and Miles, and it brings in Ornette when he got that avant kind of groove that was going that went in a different direction. And it's fascinating to think about how all of those guys were this big tree that just kind of branched out, and
Yeah,
how much of the spores are germinating today. It's wonderous.
yeah.
You know,
Awesome.
it's
Yeah.
cool. So if anyone wants to pick up your books, reach out. Any of the good business, where's the best place to go?
The easiest way is my author website, which is leeschneiderbooks.com. Just
Okay,
leeschneiderbooks.com.
that's easy enough. I will put a link in the show note. What a joy, Lee. So great to meet you, man. Thank you for
Great.
taking a minute out. Best of luck with everything.
Thanks so much. It was a lot of fun to talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely.